Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for finding us on your favorite podcast app. We're on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're also on Dash Radio during the week at 7 p.m. on their Nothing But Net channel. Make sure that you subscribe to the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. We now got 5 different NBA shows running there in addition to all the other South Florida sports, plus the videos from all the Zoom press conferences with the Miami Heat players. So you want to be subscribed there so you can check those out. And 5reasonsports.com. Don't need to subscribe to that. You just need to click. You get the latest articles from Brady Hawk, who's going to be on this episode, as well as others. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We're going to tell you about 2 of them here. One of them, of course, is Daily Fantasy. It's Prize Picks. It's a new way to play Daily Fantasy. Use the code 5, pair players together from different sports, different teams, decide to go all in with power play or hedge a little with flex play. It's a lot of fun. Been doing pretty well on it lately. So make sure you check it out. You'll get that bonus if you use the code 5. Also, we recommend if you're going to be gambling at all, not just on particular players in fantasy, but also on who's going to win particular games, you go to MyBookie. Baseball and basketball seasons are long with up to 400 potential matches a month, but you can make every one matter by having skin in the game with MyBookie.ag. So get ahead of it. Make sure that you go in and check out the Heat odds. I think it was 25-1 to win the championship. If you like the Heat in 5, it's 16-1 there. So go to MyBookie.ag. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E, and you get your first deposit matched up to $1,000. That's right. MyBookie.ag, the code 5, F-I-V-E, first deposit matched up to $1,000. They've got live betting. Do anything you want there. It's a really, really cool site. MyBookie.ag, prizepicks.com. For both of them, use the code 5. And now, today's episode.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5
on the floor.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily show on the Miami Heat and the NBA featuring Ethan Skolnick with Alex Toledo and Greg Sylvander, part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor. I'm your host, Greg Sylvander. With me for this episode is Alex Toledo, and Brady Hawk joins me as well. No Ethan Skolnick, but we got an upgrade. We were upgraded to Brady Hawk, who we thought it was an appropriate topic. The floor plan for tonight's episode is we really want to get into the Heat's offense specifically and kind of unpack what we expect to see from them and talk about some of the matchups and things like that. Brady dropped a column on 5reasonsports.com that I thought was really kind of a springboard for this podcast. And so it was just appropriate to have you on. We appreciate you joining us. So really, we're going to do this in kind of like we've got 5 reasons. So I'm going to go with 5 bullet points, but you know how this goes. We may veer in different directions and we'll just see how it starts. So this is where I want to start the podcast, because as I've watched recently, some of the stuff on TV, but I don't really watch much sports talk television. But what I'm reading on Twitter is this whole narrative of like, now that the Bucks have Drew Holiday, they have like a player to guard Jimmy. And I've found that to be a little laughable. Maybe it's a little bit of a straw man kind of situation. So I guess I'm going to start, Alex, I'm going to go to you first on this. Can Drew guard Jimmy? Like, is this something that we should actually think, okay, the Milwaukee Bucks have a solve for Jimmy Butler late in games, or is this like something that we should be laughing at?
I mean, look, I'm not scared of Drew Holiday if I'm Jimmy Butler. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, Drew Holiday is as solid as it comes when it comes to, a guard defender who can guard up to somebody of Jimmy's size. But Jimmy, man, like, he's different. Like, when it comes to his will to just get to the rim and get to the line whenever he turns that up and flips that switch, it's different. Like, you need to have somebody who's like bigger than him, just as agile. I don't, Drew is a good guy to throw on him. Like, if I'm a Bucks fan, I'm like, I feel good about that if you decide to throw Drew on Jimmy. But if I'm Jimmy Butler or if I'm a Heat fan, I'm not worried about that at all. Like, no, he's going to get to the line. They're going to force switches all the time. Like, they were doing that, throughout the whole bubble last season. He's always going to try to, look for that matchup that he wants, especially when it comes down to it and they're really looking for offense there. So, I think there's always going to be somebody he can bully on the court. And frankly, I do think he can kind of bully Drew Holiday at times, as good of a defender as he is. I just think Jimmy is that good at like forcing his will and, just getting what he wants once he actually, decides, okay, I'm going to try to get to the line here.
Brady, are we overstating Drew Holiday defending Jimmy? Like, is that going to only be a fourth quarter late game kind of thing? Or do you think they actually start out the game with Drew on Jimmy?
When I kind of think about it, I feel like, there was actually, I think, an anonymous scout today that said something about Drew Holiday. His defense is not as good as other people, like to say, which I don't think I agree with that type of statement, that I think he's still a great defender. But when I think of Drew Holiday as a defender, I think of him, going over screens, being able to push over that type of stuff. And when I think of that, I think of him guarding Duncan Robinson. It just seems like that's the route they can go. No matter what Duncan Robinson does, it just seems like throw Drew Holiday on him to navigate all the the double on ball screens Miami likes to run. That just seems like
it was Wes Matthews' job last year,
right? Yeah. And I think that was kind of where people went, like, where does he come into play? Where does the guy that guards Duncan Robinson come into play? And as Alex mentioned, I feel like they want to throw length at Jimmy Butler most of the time. They have a guy like Chris Middleton that can utilize his length as much as possible. And, now that they have Trevor Ariza at the 4, I feel like they could actually throw Giannis at times at Jimmy. Like, that doesn't seem out of the picture. Would they have the Brook Lopez guarding Bam? It just seems like that's a possible option.
That actually makes sense too, because that's like basically what the Lakers did with AD.
Yeah, and I just feel like, as much as we talked about Miami having options to kind of pick who they want to throw in guys, I feel like the Bucks have just as many options. But I think, Miami feels good with anybody when Jimmy Butler's the offensive player.
Yeah, no, I'm with you guys. I think that it's interesting that you bring up Duncan Robinson and that being who Drew would guard, because it kind of tees up where I want to go next, because there's no doubt that this is a series that I think is going to be predicated. The success of either team will be predicated on shooting to some degree. I plucked this stat out of an article, and I want to give props to the dude who wrote it, Robbie Calland, the senior sports writer at UpRocks. He wrote a playoff preview, and I found it to be pretty useful. So only the Hornets allowed more 3-point attempts per game than the Heat. The Heat allowed 39 attempts. The Bucks almost 39 attempts, 38.6. Miami shot 38% from 3 against Milwaukee this regular season. So as we talk about Duncan Robinson and Drew, chasing him around and stuff like that, of the non-Duncan players, like this jumped out at me, and this was in his article. Kelly Olynyk and Jay Crowder shot 43% from deep against Milwaukee last year in the playoffs. Crowder was 22 of 51. So, like, we know Duncan needs to shoot well, and maybe that is a focus of their of the Bucks defense, and they try to take Duncan out of the game with Drew. Does Miami need 2 non-Duncan Robinson players to shoot the way that Crowder and Kelly Olynyk did for Miami last year in the playoffs?
I think so. I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think, especially with, I don't, and I think we've kind of talked about this all season. I don't know that you're going to be able to rely on Goran and give you that same type of production he gave you versus the Bucks last year. He was great during that series. I haven't pulled up the numbers, but I remember he was cooking them, and that's the type of team where Goran could get hot. So he may have a good series, but it really does. To me, it's kind of like it's on all the guards, right? And all the shooting in general to just kind of come through. You need 2 of them to come through the way they did last year, like you're mentioning, right? I think it doesn't even matter really who it is. I just think as long as you can hit a good amount of threes, I don't really care who it comes from. I think the threes are going to be flying in this series from both sides, as you kind of alluded to there. It's these 2 teams, it's what they do. Even though the Heat don't play much of a drop at all anymore like they did last year, even though the Bucks don't play full drop, like they did last year, and they kind of switched it up. Especially ever since they added PJ Tucker, like they have even more options they could do now. Even with those 2 things there, these are 2 teams that still allow so many threes. At least from the Heat side, we know why, because even though they're not dropping, they're constantly over helping from the corners or from wherever. They're constantly throwing help and seeding those 3-pointers from shooters that maybe they want taking those threes rather than getting, star players comfy shots. They're always going to throw the help. So I think even if the Heat aren't dropping, there's going to be a series where between, the fronting and helping every time Giannis has the ball. And I think you're going to see trapping. And they're going to do stuff with Middleton and Drew have the ball too. So I think there's going to be a whole lot of help defense, a whole lot of rotations, and a whole lot of threes flying from both ends. And, I think it's going to be on a couple of those guards to really come through as three-point shooters here. I think they absolutely need those two guys to really come through here in order to win, because the margin for error is that low, I think.
Yeah, so I'm going to deviate from the script just for a second because I want to pick Brady's brain a little bit here. So in the event that they really just want to have Jimmy and Bam out there with three shooters, who are the three shooters that you're picking? Just quickly.
At the end of a game?
Yeah.
Obviously, Duncan Robinson. I feel like that's the clear one. The way that Kendrick Nunn's playing right now, I feel like he has to be out there. At the end of a game, it just seems like they haven't done that much, but the way the numbers have shot up, I've talked about it, that 35 to 42% in catch and shoot just seems like an obvious way. And then I think you pick between Goran and Tyler, depending on the night, because I feel like most nights in a playoff night, you might go with Goran, but I feel like there's those nights where, both ways. If Goran's not having a good night, we've seen it. We've seen the nights where Tyler's off, and I think you pick and choose, which is a bit odd because I feel like we once were saying that about Kendrick Nunn in that conversation. And now I feel like we're like, he's kind of had his, consistency. He's had his moments that we're including him in those lineups. And I think another reason is that Kendrick and Goran are able to play together now. That's the big thing. Now that they're able to put Kendrick off the ball, they could do that. So I'd probably say, Kendrick, Duncan, then one of Goran and Tyler, depending on the night.
So we're not going to deviate too far off the script. Because you kind of teed me up here for this next part where I really want to discuss. I know that the Bucks are doing less of this drop defense stuff, and I noticed that even my novice eye was able to pick up on that as I watched throughout this year, that there was a lot more switching happening and stuff that I didn't notice in the playoffs last year. I'm interested, Alex, for your perspective on. I know, like in Brady's column, he really highlighted how Kendrick Nunn is. Like a drop killer. He really can operate in that space. I think Tyler Hero is playing in a way right now where he can capitalize that way as well. Do you think that those guys are kind of primed just based off of, and I know they're not dropping as much, but like, do you think that those two are primed for a big series, and do they have to have a big series for Miami to win?
Yes. And yes, it pretty much connects to my last answer. I just think like, the Bucks got better. The Heat aren't as consistent. I'm just not as sure about them as I was last year at this time. Even though, I picked the Heat over the Bucks last year, but like the Bucks just weren't, for some reason to me. Like I think outside of those two, Giannis and Middleton, you just didn't really trust the rest of the guys that they had there to do a whole lot and to really damage you. And I feel like that's kind of changed for me this year. And it's not really like. It's Drew, but it's also the rest of their team. They just seem kind of like more. It seems like a real adult team now, right? It seems like a real playoff team with grown men. And instead of, we're going to see Connaughton and DiVincenzo minutes, but we're going to see Drew Holiday. We're going to see PJ Tucker. And like even Bobby Portis has been solid for them, right? So
it's true.
Yes. Especially and the answer now is exactly. The answer now is the margin for error is low, and they're still dropping when Lopez or Porter's on the floor, and those guys are still going to get minutes. And as a result, Goran, Tyler, Kendrick, they all got to get it going, because that's their game right there. Like the Heat, specifically Jimmy and Bam, we already know how they go throughout the flow of a game, kind of looking for those guys to get those shots, especially when Lopez and Portis are on the floor. I expect there to be a lot of Bam looking for one of those shooters. I think we're going to see a whole lot of that, and it's going to be up to them to make those shots. Like I think Kendrick has gotten good at figuring out, okay, I'm going to, kind of wait for the screen and the contact to hit, and then, dribble around it and take the pull up. It's kind of an easy move for him. Goran is good at manipulating a defense. And if he can get that pull up three going, that would be great. And it's almost the same thing for Tyler. Like they all kind of have similar things that they can get going there as pull up guys. And it's really going to be up to them, just because they already know once they get that dribble there, and if it's Lopez or Portis back there, they're just not going to be playing that high. And if they decide to play high at times throughout the game to move them up a little bit closer to the screen, that pass to Bam is going to be there. Or if not, the corners guy is going to be open. So there's going to be a lot of different things that he can do there, but it's going to depend on those guards to actually hit their shots, because if they're not, like, it's going to be really, really ugly because those are the shots that are going to be there for them.
So we're halfway through this episode, and we haven't talked about Bam Adebayo yet. We mentioned Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, and I think Bam has a major advantage there. So we need to discuss that. But before we do, I want to tell you about one of our great sponsors. That's Therapist Preferred. They are a CBD company founded in 2019 by a physical therapist to optimize performance and recovery for active people. Their products are 100% THC free. Third-party lab verified, all products made in the USA. They sent me a care package and they were delicious. And they also, made me feel much more calm and relaxed. And for me with pent-up anxiety, it was great. They're really using cutting edge technology with organically grown hemp. Their most popular products are the CBD sports cream, strawberry lemonade, and green apple flavored gummies. Those were the ones I got. They were great. I think Alex got that care package as well. So that was good stuff.
Those gummies taste like candy, bro. You got to get them away from me.
So go to therapistpreferred.com, free shipping on all orders. Use the promo code 5 reasons. That's the number 5 reasons for 20% off your order and free shipping. Follow them on social media at Therapist Preferred. It is for active people by active people. So back to our episode. Brady, you wrote a lot about this in your piece, so you're going to articulate it better than I. When I wrote our show notes, I put Bam at the elbow and in the mid-range and what it unlocks. So I'm going to let you unpack that for the listeners because I think you did a good job of articulating it in your piece in terms of the different actions they can run, but just the fact that they're going to give Bam the shot that he can make and he just has to take it. Like, here we go. It's show and prove time for Bam Adebayo, right? And this is the perfect opportunity. Tell us about how Bam's going to approach this series on offense.
Yeah, I think even looking back at the last game against Milwaukee on Saturday, it was like in the first 3 minutes of the video clip I put in, he had the jumper. Like the jumper was there. Brook Lopez stepped back even farther than usual, basically like playing mental games with him to tell him to shoot it. And Bam kind of looked at him, looked to his left and passed to a covered Duncan Robinson. The ball went out of bounds. And then a couple minutes later, he got the ball on a rebound, dribbled down, and then pulled up, at the free throw line, knocked it down, which is, I think his only shot attempt of the half, which cannot be a case in a playoff series. But it just seems like that's the guy. Like we talk about the Kendrick Nuns of the drop coverage, but Bam is the guy of the base of this offense that has to, force everything to run. If Kendrick Nuns are getting those looks, that's not going to be the reason they win these games. The reason they win these games is because Bam Adebayo is taking that jumper. And it's funny because we always talk about him, the base of his offense. We want him to attack. But now in this series, he needs to shoot the jumper. Like that's his game. And I think the thing that kind of ties into it, which always ties into it, is Duncan Robinson. Looking at the way he was running stuff in the playoff series last year, which once again, they're not going to be doing the same stuff as they did last year. Everything changes, same different personnel, different team. But there is going to be some stuff that, stays the same. I mentioned, looking at game 1 and 2 last year, Duncan Robinson was getting good looks. Like he was running some of the stuff he's running this year in the high pick and roll, getting good looks, knocking some down. And then by game 3, there was a possession, I think 30 seconds into the game of game 3, where Duncan Robinson did the same thing he did in the first 2 games, runs into the corner and they double out on him. And then he had to throw the pocket pass to Bam. We talk about Budenholzer not making the adjustments, but there was a small adjustments like that where we're not going to let Duncan Robinson get good looks. And if they do that again, once again, it comes down to Bam because Bam's the receiver of the pocket pass. He gets to run the 4-on-3 on the weak side, and he's going to have the jumper if it's there. So it's like everything stems from Bam Adebayo. And as much as we talk about Duncan Robinson, like I said, it just comes back to him. And it comes back to you mentioning the thing about the other shooters, 2 non-Duncan guys. Bam Adebayo is going to make the right read and he's going to kick it to them to get a good look. And it's just going to come down to him, them knocking it down. But once again, it just seems like so much is on Bam Adebayo in this series. And one other thing is that we're looking at stuff from this season without Jimmy Butler on the floor. Stuff's going to look different when he's on the floor. That it's just like, I think the Bucks too, like if they're looking at film from this season and can't see anything with Jimmy Butler against their defense, it's like, it makes things weird, but it just, for Miami, it's a positive thing because it's only going to go in the positive direction.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like Jimmy didn't play against Brooklyn and he didn't play against Philly except that last game. He didn't play against Milwaukee. I mean, it almost looks like it's like some telegraph stuff there by the Heat, just holding Jimmy back. But back to Bam, Alex. So like nobody can stop dude, right? On this team. I mean, I guess Giannis could a little bit. I mean, I guess if we're really being as unbiased as possible, but I don't know that they necessarily go there. Do you think that that's what they're going to do? Or is Bam Adebayo really going to be given the freedom that Brady is predicting just based off the way that Milwaukee defends?
I mean, look, I'm not 100% sure. I think I would guess that it's still going to be Lopez as his matchup. And they've always liked having Giannis as a, just kind of an elite help defender who can, help from the weak side and kind of be all over the place, especially because Brook is somebody who you always want parked out there in the paint, and Bam kind of mostly operates in the paint, even though he operates at the high elbow, like they're dropping back like Brady's talking about. And I could not agree more that a lot is going to be on Bam this series, especially if those jumpers are not falling, because we've seen that even though they've trended up over the past couple of months, it hasn't always been a guaranteed thing like it was last season when we were all confident about the shooting. So if the shooting is not great, I fear that we're going to kind of, that Bam aggression conversation is going to just keep getting louder and louder and louder, because I feel like, we all know that, Jimmy's going to give us great play. And I think he even has to turn it up a little bit from what he did last year, specifically versus the Bucks, right? Because like, what he did versus the Lakers is different than what he did versus the Bucks. I think he has to turn it up a little bit from there, again, because of the Goran thing, because of the shooting thing. I just think kind of the offense isn't as great as it was last year. And so if some of those jumpers aren't falling from the other guys, the onus is going to be on Bam to step up, because everybody knows that Bam could shake Brook Lopez if he wanted to. The thing is, like Brady said, Brook is dropping back so low that he's asking him basically to hit the short kind of awkward jumpers, or the intermediate floaters and runners and stuff like that, which we know Bam has. Bam has a touch for that, but it's kind of like a mental confidence game, I think, there, where it's like, okay, is this the shot that I should be taking right now? And this is something that's been talked about, I think, in the past, especially with Spo, just because like I don't think that's what they want to do, right? Like it's obvious that what they want to do is find the good looks to set up the rest of their guys to, so that they could be a nice team offense. And it's not Jimmy and Bam trying to bail everybody out always. And I think they look at Bam's midi as like a counter if everything else isn't there. And I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of that. So he needs to start taking that for sure when it's there. And I have a feeling, I'm saying all of this now because to me, based on kind of the way that it's gone all season, there's going to be a couple of games in this series where we're going to be upset with Bam, even though he might have a great game otherwise. But it just feels like that's what's going to happen, because we know how Bam is. We know that Brook's going to be dropping back, and that's not what they're looking for. It's not like, okay, that's there, take it. I don't think that's what they're telling him. And maybe that changes, right? But up to now, that's not really what we've seen from this team. So I think there's going to be some frustration there. But between what Bam is going to be responsible for on defense with Giannis
beat me to it,
and the rest of the team, and everything that he's going to have to do on offense to set up those guys, like it's a whole lot of pressure on Bam in this series, I think.
And you know what? That's all healthy stuff for him, I think, ultimately, to feel this kind of stuff and to start to get more and more on his plate and him just continue to drive this thing. So we know the starting five. I think that we all probably agree that the top nine includes Goran, Iggy, Dedmon, and Hero off the bench, right? That's our nine, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty predictable. I think there's no realistic opportunity that I see for anybody beyond those nine to make a real big impact. But I'm interested for each of you to go, and I'm going to start, Brady, with you. What's the biggest, I guess, I in our notes, I wrote offensive wrinkle we see from Spo, but it may not necessarily be an offensive wrinkle. It could be a rotation move, an adjustment. What's the unexpected from Spo that you may think he would be planning this week?
I think it's going to be relating back to what they did last series. I think they're going to go heavy dribble handoff again. Like that was kind of the thing that they really thrived off of. We can look at the numbers that they shot so well from three, the reason they shot so well from three is they were getting those looks off the dribble handoffs. And we're talking about the deep drop with Brook Lopez down there giving Bam the jumper. That means it's Bam setting a pick for one defender, two of them at the top of the key. And that basically can unlock what Bam wants to do, rotating downhill and getting the ball on the move to get to the rim if he wants to do that, if he's not just sticking with the jumper. So I feel like that's where it comes into play. We saw them doing like a bunch of pin downs for Hero because of, once again, they have one defender on the perimeter. It just seems like that's where they're heading. Something interesting, I think it was Ariza that said it today, is that he was like mentioning that the adjustments won't come till game 2. I don't agree with that, though. I think that Spoelstra is not going to wait till game 2. It just seems like they're not going to waste a game before they make an adjustment. I think the adjustment comes right out the gate. And it ties back to Duncan Robinson, too. We saw, like I mentioned before, game 1 and 2, he got the looks. Game 3, the Bucks changed it. They started doubling out at him. I think they're going to try to get Duncan Robinson with some dribble handoffs early, see how the Bucks react to it, make Budenholzer a little bit uncomfortable, forcing him into adjustments. And then from there, you kind of, play your base offense. But I feel like dribble handoffs is going to become a big base, at least in Milwaukee in the first 2 games.
I, again, could not agree more. And that's kind of, it relates to what I said about Bam, too, because we know that those shots are going to be there for these guards. And I think he knows that, too. And that's why I think he's going to be kind of, looking for it a lot more than he's looking for his own shot. And we're going to see a lot of those handoffs. And I know we talked all year, like they got to diversify, but a team like that, when they've got, bigs out there who drop like they do, it not only is it smart to get good looks, but like you said, they're going to throw it at them early. And it's going to be like a data collection thing, I think, for Spo. Like, how do they guard this, right? When we throw this handoff, what are they going to do, right? Like, are they going to throw a second guy there? Are they going to have Brook come up? And I think they're going to kind of adjust from there. And I also agree about, Spo not waiting a game to adjust. And it's almost hard to differentiate Spo's adjustments versus his game plan, because for the whole season, like, he's been throwing out so many different things. I'm like, is that just part of the plan? Especially if you ask him. No doubt. He's not going to give me a damn thing, right? There's multiple decoy candidates on that team, on that roster. But really, like, to me, we're going to see a whole lot of dribble handoffs. I think there's going to be a little bit of frustration from the fans there too, because they're going to be like, is this all you're looking for? But I think we're not going to see it as much if Giannis is playing at the 5, because that's when they get to switching. And I'm honestly, and that's the other wrinkle I was going to talk about here, is when they do get to switching, the Heat are going to have to get to mismatch hunting. And Jimmy is awesome at that. I mentioned earlier in the show that he's really good at that. Last year it was George Hill and Pat Connaughton. Yes, we're going to see a whole lot of guard screens. Absolutely. They're going to throw that again. I think we're going to see a little bit of that Goran Bam pick and roll if we get Goran on the floor at the same time as Lopez or Portis, guys who maybe can't guard on the move as well. And also just like Bam punishing mismatches. I think that's the difference between last year and this year. Although Bam still isn't finished or polished as a scorer, he's definitely gotten better at that part. Just, he's not Sabonis or Jokic in the post down there, but he's got a couple of simple post moves and some recognition now that every once in a while, yeah, bro, you're allowed to, punish a mismatch when you got a small on you. So I think that's going to be essential and useful when the Bucks are out there switching. It's just going to be tough because, I don't know that he could do that on PJ Tucker. I even Drew Holiday, right? Who's got Bam's going to have a big size advantage with him. Drew Holiday is somebody who can really guard in the post too. So there's some guys there, but if you got a Middleton or a DiVincenzo or a Connaughton or a Bryn Forbes,
just go.
Like you got to take him down there. And I think we're going to see some of that too. So to me, I'm really interested to see if Spo decides to look for Bam more as a scorer here. And if he's just kind of been waiting until the playoffs to really do that, because it just seems like, it's right there in front of you, right? They did not trade for another scorer. I mean, look, they traded for Oladipo. It didn't work out. The roster is the roster. And it almost seems like, that's the one thing that they haven't tapped into yet is, utilizing Bam more as a scorer. You're going to be playing him more. So I'm going to see if that's Spo's secret weapon for this playoffs.
It's funny. We just basically unpacked the Heat offense, and we did a lot of Bam Adebayo discussion. And game 1 will probably be Jimmy Butler, 44 points.
Give me Jimmy, man. We already know what Jimmy's going to give us, right? There's no question about it.
we talk about the guard screens. It's like, okay, bring all those fools, the Drew Holidays and who was the other guy you mentioned? PJ Tucker. Bring his
get
ass
Middleton in
on
foul
over.
trouble in like the first quarter.
Jimmy Butler will take care of him. I think the key takeaways before we close up shop here is nobody on that team can guard Jimmy Butler. That's going to become very apparent very quickly. I personally expect Tyler Hero to have a gigantic series. I think it's going to be a huge bounce back for him. So that's something that I am looking for personally. And the other part of this is the 3-point shooting. I mean, I hate to just harp on something that's so obvious, but like, with these teams allowing the amount of attempts that they do, you got to hit them, and it's a make or miss deal. And I know that that's a little cliche, but that's where
we got better
heading.
shooters.
Yep.
I don't even think it's particularly close. I think, they've pretty much got Middleton and Bryn Forbes. The Heat, outside of that, I've got more shooters and better shooters, I think.
This is true. And here's the last thing, and this is where we're going to close. If the Heat take game one, the Milwaukee Bucks are going to have a whole bunch of tertiary shooters that have the dirty pants. And that's not a good recipe for shooting well the rest of the series. So I feel like the Heat can gain a clear mental edge if they come in and punch Milwaukee in the mouth game one. Let's hope they do. Thank you for joining us on 5 on the Floor. We'll be back the rest of the week teeing you up for game one on Saturday at 2 p.m. Brady, thank you for joining us. Alex, as always, peace.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.